The moment Shedeur Sanders walked up to that podium in Berea, you could feel the room waiting for something. Not a scandal, not a meltdown, just an answer. Because a week of noise had built up around one decision, and everybody wanted to know if the rookie quarterback was going to blow it up or shut it down. Here's the backstory for anyone who missed it. Todd Monken told the media, and reportedly told Shedeur directly, that he was going to get first-team reps. Then, when the moment came, it was Deshaun Watson under center with the ones instead. I'll be honest with you, when that story broke, I was frustrated. I said what a lot of people were thinking. It felt like a bait and switch, like a coach making a promise and then quietly walking away from it the second the cameras were rolling. I was hard on Monken about it. I wasn't shy about that opinion, and for a few days it looked like the entire Browns quarterback competition was cracking before it even got started. Then Shedeur showed up to speak, and everything about the tone of this story changed. He wasn't fired up. He wasn't defensive. He didn't take the bait when reporters tried to get him to say the plan had changed on him without warning. Instead, he basically told the room that whatever the coaching staff communicates is direct, that there was no miscommunication between him and Monken, and that people jumping to the conclusion that the coach was tripping or going back on his word was creating drama that didn't need to exist. That's not spin. That's not a company line he was forced to recite. Listen to how he framed it. He said if everybody in that building is there to win and build something as a team and a franchise, then outside noise has to take a back seat. And if some people are just there for clicks, he said, then that's understood too. That's a rookie quarterback drawing a line between the internet's version of events and the version that's actually happening inside his own locker room. And that's the part that stopped me. Because he's right. I got caught up in the outside version. Let's slow down and actually walk through what he said, because there's a lot more in this press conference than just damage control on the reps controversy, and every piece of it tells you something about who this guy is becoming as a pro. Start with the simplest exchange, the one about game status for that Saturday. A reporter asked him point blank if he knew when he'd be getting into the game. His answer wasn't cagey. It wasn't a diversion. It was almost disarmingly simple. Monken will tell everybody when Monken is ready to tell everybody, and Shedeur will know exactly when the team knows. No frustration in it. No hint that he felt entitled to information before it was his to have. In a league where quarterbacks routinely posture in front of cameras, that kind of restraint is rare, and it tells the coaching staff something valuable. This guy isn't going to freelance with the media. He's not going to create a controversy the building has to clean up later. Then came the stuff that actually explains why he's playing well. He talked about being more comfortable inside the offense now, while being upfront that there are still things to correct every single day. That's not humility for the cameras. Quarterbacks who are lying to themselves about their weaknesses don't usually bring them up unprompted. He also got into something you don't hear a lot of 22 and 23-year-olds articulate this clearly. The idea of managing his own energy like a resource. He described it almost like a battery, saving effort throughout the day so that by the time he's on the practice field, he can operate fast, with purpose, without wasting motion. He said getting pulled in a lot of different directions is what actually drains him, more than the physical grind itself. Think about what that means for a rookie trying to survive an NFL training camp. He's not just managing routes and protections. He's managing his own bandwidth like a veteran would, because he already knows what burns him out and what doesn't. There was a lighter moment buried in there too, when someone asked him about the blisters that had been rumored to be affecting his hand. He confirmed it, but downplayed it completely, saying it came from the volume of throwing he put in over the offseason, that it flared up right around the start of camp, and that it's fully healed now. It's a small detail, but it matters, because it shows you the kind of workload he was putting himself through before anyone was watching. Blisters from throwing don't happen from a light off-season program. They happen from a guy trying to force his mechanics and his arm strength into game shape on his own time, long before training camp cameras were rolling and long before anyone was asking him about depth charts. There was even a moment of actual levity in that press conference, the kind you don't usually get to see once a quarterback competition turns into a media storyline. A reporter tried to needle him about which specific area of his game had improved the most, And instead of running down a checklist, he pivoted and credited becoming a better teammate, gesturing toward a teammate standing next to him. It got a laugh out of the room. Somebody even asked him, half joking, what song he'd want playing if he ever got a walkout entrance. And he said something about wanting perfect timing and hoped the same for the guy next to him. It's a throwaway 30 seconds in the grand scheme of a 15-minute press conference, but it tells you the locker room culture around him isn't as tense as the outside narrative wants you to believe. Guys competing for the same job don't usually crack jokes with each other in front of cameras unless the relationship underneath it is actually solid. Now here's where the story gets more interesting, because the conversation shifted into what's actually going to define this competition long term: the hitting. A coach on that staff had said publicly that he wants to see both Shedeur and Deshaun in preseason games specifically because contact changes the evaluation. Getting hit is a different test than running a clean scripted rep in shells. So a reporter asked Shedeur directly how the game changes for him once he knows he can actually be hit. And his answer told you everything about his mentality. He basically said, this doesn't faze him at all at this stage of his life, that he's already been hit constantly through college and through his rookie season, and that the real challenge for him isn't absorbing contact, it's avoiding it in the first place by getting through his reads fast enough that the ball is out before the hit ever lands. He said he treats that like a personal challenge even in practice, refusing to take it lightly just because the pads aren't fully live. That's a quarterback who has already reframed pressure as something to solve with process, not something to fear. And then there's the rotation issue itself, the one that started this whole conversation. He was asked how he's handled the day-to-day swapping of first-team reps between him and Watson. His response was almost strikingly calm. He said it doesn't get to him, that he doesn't even really think about it, and that he's simply thankful to be out there practicing at all, especially when you consider where he was in that exact same window last year. He talked about consciously choosing gratitude over resentment, saying that if you live your life chasing what you want instead of appreciating what you have, you'll always be searching for something just out of reach. That's not coach speak. That's a guy who's actively practicing a mindset, not just repeating one he was told to say. Here's the part I think gets buried under all the reps controversy, and it might be the most important stat of this entire camp. Reporters pointed out that there have been a wave of interceptions thrown across this camp, that the defense has been getting after everybody, and that Shedeur has somehow avoided being part of that trend. He's had the fewest turnovers of anyone getting real run. When he was asked why, he didn't credit talent or arm strength. He credited process, trusting his reads, understanding situational football, understanding down and distance, and refusing to force a throw just because a route is covered. He was honest that not every interception last season was a bad decision. Some were tipped, some just happened, but he said the emphasis now is being fully confident and standing behind every choice he makes, on the field and off it. He tied that directly to how he lives his life outside of football, saying decisions off the field carry the same weight, the same ownership, the same refusal to make excuses. Now put all of that next to the reps controversy, and you start to see the real story here, and it's not the one that got clicks a week ago. A coaching staff can rotate first-team reps for a dozen legitimate reasons. Load management, evaluating a veteran against a certain look, giving Watson live snaps against a defense he hasn't seen much of, testing how each quarterback handles the unpredictability of not knowing exactly when his opportunity is coming. None of that has to mean anything sinister about where Shedeur stands. What actually matters, from an evaluation standpoint, is how the young quarterback responds when the plan shifts on him publicly, in front of cameras, with a fan base and a media cycle ready to turn it into a soap opera. And by every account in that room, he responded by protecting the building instead of himself. He didn't throw his coach under the bus. He didn't hint at frustration. He redirected the entire narrative toward accountability and away from grievance. Think about how differently this could have gone. A rookie with a bigger ego, or a shorter fuse, or less trust in his own coaching staff could have used that podium to plant a seed. A pointed comment about fairness, a subtle dig about promises made and broken. It wouldn't have even needed to be dramatic. Just a little bit of daylight between what he said and what actually happened, and the story writes itself into a full-blown QB controversy that follows this team into the regular season. Instead, he shut the door on that version of events before it could even form. That's a level of message discipline you usually only see from quarterbacks who've already been through a few years of learning the hard way that every word in front of a microphone gets amplified. He's doing it as a rookie, in year one, in the middle of the most scrutinized position battle on the roster. If I'm in that Browns front office, or if I'm Kevin Stefanski watching this unfold from a distance, that answer tells me more about Shedeur Sanders than a stat line from one practice ever could. Because quarterback competitions aren't just won with arm talent, they're won with trust. Coaches trust players who don't create separate problems out of coaching decisions. Teammates trust quarterbacks who don't throw shade at teammates fighting for the same job. And front offices trust players who can handle instability without becoming unstable themselves. Watson may have gotten those first-team reps that day, but Shedeur just banked something that could matter a lot more over the course of a long season: credibility with everyone in that building who was watching how he'd react. There's also a broader lesson here for how we all cover this stuff, myself included. I jumped on the version of the story that was easiest to be angry about. A coach says one thing, does another, and it's simple to frame that as betrayal. But Shedeur's answer forced a more complicated, more accurate picture into the conversation, one where communication inside the building was clear the entire time, and the only miscommunication was happening out here, in the coverage. That's worth sitting with. It's easy to build a villain out of a rotation decision. It's harder, and more honest, to admit that sometimes the drama we're chasing isn't actually happening where we think it is. None of this means the quarterback competition is settled, and it doesn't mean Shedeur is guaranteed anything going forward. Deshaun Watson is still the more experienced arm on that roster, still getting live preseason snaps specifically because the staff wants to see him under contact after everything he's been through physically. The staff clearly isn't handing this job to anyone off maturity points alone, and they shouldn't. Maturity doesn't move the ball down the field on 3rd and 7. But maturity does determine how a young quarterback handles the parts of this process that have nothing to do with talent. And there is a long list of talented rookies who never got a real chance because they couldn't handle exactly the kind of week Shedeur just went through. What changed isn't the depth chart, it's the perception of who's built to handle whatever the depth chart throws at him. A player who treats practice like a game, who manages his own energy like a professional, who owns his mistakes instead of explaining them away, and who refuses to let outside noise dictate his emotional state, is a player coaches want to keep building around no matter what order the reps come in on a given Tuesday. And there's a leverage angle here too, one that doesn't show up on a snap count. Watson getting first-team reps in that moment might look like a short-term win on paper, but leverage inside a quarterback room isn't only measured in reps. It's measured in how the coaching staff talks about you behind closed doors, how the locker room responds to you when things get uncomfortable, and how much rope you get the next time a decision doesn't break your way. Shedeur just extended his own rope without throwing a single pass to do it. That's the kind of equity that doesn't show up until later in the season, when a game plan needs a quarterback the coaching staff genuinely trusts under pressure, not just one with the higher completion percentage in a padless practice. So going forward, I'm watching two things closely. First, how the coaching staff actually distributes preseason snaps once the pads come fully on, and the hitting becomes real, because that's when Shedeur himself said the evaluation actually gets honest, not before. A quiet practice rep tells you about footwork and timing. A live hit tells you about poise, and poise is exactly the department where he just made his loudest statement all camp, without throwing a single pass to do it. Second, I'm watching how he continues to handle these moments publicly because he's already shown once that he can absorb a controversy the media created and hand it back with more composure than anyone expected from a rookie. That's not something a coaching staff can install with a playbook or a film session. Guys either have that internal wiring or they spend years trying to build it under a microscope that doesn't wait for them to catch up. Right now, it's looking like Shedeur Sanders already has it, and he had it before anyone outside that building was paying close enough attention to notice. I was wrong to pile on Monken the way I did last week, and I said so at the top of this because accountability has to run both ways if I'm going to keep covering this fairly. It's easy to sit outside a building and assume the worst about a coaching decision you don't have full context on. It's a lot harder to actually wait, listen to the people living inside that decision, and adjust your take when the facts don't match the outrage. Shedeur held himself to that standard in front of a room full of reporters who were actively trying to get him to say something else. The least I can do is hold myself to that same standard out here. This quarterback competition in Cleveland isn't finished, and it isn't going to be decided by one practice rotation or one press conference. But if this past week is any indication of how Shedeur Sanders handles pressure that has nothing to do with football itself, then whoever ends up under center for this team in the regular season, they're going to be dealing with a young quarterback in that room who already knows how to keep his composure when everything around him is trying to make him lose it.